Hello, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. Happy Sunday. Look, I'm still having technical issues, so I'm sure some of this stuff didn't play out exactly the way it should have. Um, but just so you know, I am here and ready to start this this book series that we talked about. I am currently live on both the VLenore channel and VLenore Uncut. However, we are only going to be live on the VLenore Uncut channel only. Okay, so if you are not subscribed, please subscribe to VLenore Uncut. And let me see, I'm certain that we have a couple of moderators here in the chat. So if you wouldn't mind putting the VLenore Uncut um, a link in the chat so that everyone can join over there, please do. Because I'm going to shut down VLenore in just a few seconds. But just so that we all know what we're here to discuss and listen to, the book is called Blue Like Jazz, and the author's name is Donald Miller. And again, I was not familiar with this book or even this author until just a few weeks ago. Okay. And hopefully, you all will find it to be as fulfilling as I found it to be. You can purchase this book on Amazon. Again, the title is Blue Like Jazz. The author's name is Donald Miller, and it only costs $10.99, okay, on Amazon. My understanding is that it is also available on Audible or on Kindle. You can have the audio version of it if you'd like. Um, I did not have that luxury of listening to the author because I love a good audiobook. And I especially like an audiobook that is read by the actual author. But I didn't have that luxury. So some of you will just have to put up with me reading it. Okay. So if you are interested in joining us today, feel free. If you don't have the book, you don't need it because I'm going to read it. Okay. I'm going to read it aloud, and I'll probably stop periodically so that we can discuss it as we go. But just know you do not have to have the book in order to follow along with this discussion. Okay. So, with that said, if you are currently on the VLenore page, please, we invite you to join us over at VLenore Uncut, where we will read this here book. And I'm thinking I will probably drop the link, we'll see how it's feeling. Drop the link, and a few of you can come up and we can discuss it together. Okay. So, with that said, I am going to go ahead now and say goodbye to all of you that are on the VLenore page. I will possibly be back later tonight to talk about some of this Nesto stuff that I've missed out on or something. There's so much to talk about. So I'll probably be live again today. But right now, we're just going to be over here at the Uncut page, cutting up. Okay. So with that said, we'll see you guys later. If you're not over there, join us now. Bye. Okay. All right, those of you. All right, family. How is everybody else doing? Let me say hi to you guys. Let me see who's here. Jam said my book came around 2 p.m. today. Just in time, honey. Just in time, Jam. Hey, the only HL loves. Hey, Fedora. Hey, Miss HLS. Lexi, the law nerd. The real VB. Hello. Hey, Petty Patty. Let's see. Wait, the real VB. Why are you? Why are you not in blue? That's weird. I gotta figure that out. Um, hey, us seniors need love too. Hey, Chi-Town CPA, Sassy Peach, Jackson Tabasco. Oh, I know why you're not, because it's the uncut page, huh? That's it. Wait a minute. So Lexi the Law Nerd, you need to come over to the uncut page too. I'm guessing maybe she's over there. Okay. So that's why. That's why. Okay. I need to mod up a couple people over here. Child, I got so much modding up to do in different places. It's crazy right now. I need to take a note and fix all of that. Hi, Sassy Peach. Let's see who else. Hey, Miss LA. Mai Tai. Who else? CCN TV. Hello. How are you? That's a Miss LA. Hello. Minding business. Jackson Tabasco. Let's see who else. Who else? Mons. Hello. I am Mrs. Ricks. Sound check Annette. Retro in my fro. Yes, Miss Mad About Music. All right. Okay, this might be a real small, intimate setting today. I'm cool with it. Okay. I'm with it if y'all with it. Again, let me put this up. Hey, Storylines. Hello. So I'm gonna put this up again just so everybody can see what I'm reading from. Okay, so I'm gonna just go ahead and get started here. All right. I'm not going to read the author's note. Well, I'll read that because it's real short. The author's note says, I never liked jazz. I never liked jazz music because jazz music doesn't resolve. But I was outside the Baghdad Theater in Portland one night when I saw a man playing the saxophone. I stood there for 15 minutes and he never opened his eyes. After that, I like jazz music. Sometimes you have to watch somebody love something before you can love it yourself. It is as if they are showing you the way. I used to not like God because God didn't resolve, but that was before any of this happened. And I wondered, when I first grabbed the book, I told you guys that how I became acquainted with the book. And when I first grabbed it off the bookshelf, I'm not a big jazz person. Like I like a little smooth jazz, depending upon the mood I'm in and the setting I'm in and what I got going on. But when it was described in this way, I thought it was really interesting. I thought, okay, that makes sense. Jazz music doesn't resolve. It feels like there's no real beginning or ending to it, but it's all about a feeling. And when it was explained in that way, I really did appreciate that. So let's see. Wait, Now see, look at the devil. The devil is busy. Jackson Tabasco, the devil is busy. Okay, y'all, if you have some holy water, would you please sprinkle it upon this young lady's head, okay, and her feet and her hands, and then open up her mouth and just pour it down her damn throat. Okay, do that, please, please. Okay, please. All right, here we go. Chapter 1. Okay, the devil is busy on this here Sunday. What'd you say? And under my arms, please. Oh God. Okay. Okay. Chapter 1 is called Beginnings. God on a dirt road walking towards me. I once listened to an Indian on television say that God was in the. I'm sorry. Hold on one second, y'all. Hold on one second. Okay, I'm sorry, you guys. All right. Um, all right. I once listened to an Indian on television say that God was in the wind and the water. And I wondered at how beautiful that was because it meant you could swim in him or have him brush your face in a breeze. I'm early in my story, but I believe I will stretch out into eternity. And in heaven, I will reflect upon these days, these these early days, these days when it seemed God was down a dirt road walking towards me. Years ago, he was a swinging speck in the distance. Now he is a close enough I can hear his singing. Soon I will see the lines on his face. My father left my home when I was young. So when I was introduced to the concept of God as father, I imagined him as a stiff, oily man who wanted to move into our house and share a bed with my mother. I can only remember this as a frightful and threatening idea. We were a poor family who attended a wealthy church. So I imagined God as a man who had a lot of money and drove a big car. At church, they told us we were children of God, but I knew God's family was better than mine, that he had a daughter who was a cheerleader and a son who played football. I was born with a small bladder, so I wet the bed till I was 10 and later developed a crush on the homecoming queen who was kind to me in a political sort of way, which is something she probably learned from her father, who was the president of a bank. And so from the beginning, the chasm that separated me from God was as deep as wealth and as wide as fashion. In Houston, where I grew up, the only change in the weather came in late October when cold is sent down from Canada. Weathermen in Dallas would call weathermen in Houston so people knew to bring their plants in and watch after their dogs. Hold on one second, y'all. Let me turn my phone on vibrate. Sorry about that. Okay. Weathermen in Dallas would call weathermen in Houston so people knew to bring their plants in and watch their dogs. The cold came down the interstate, tall and blue, and made reflections in the mirrored windows of large buildings, moving over the Gulf of Mexico, as if to prove that sky holds magnitude over water. In Houston, in October, everybody walks around with a certain energy as if they are going to be elected president the next day, as if they are going to get married. In the winter, it was easier for me to believe in God, and I suppose it had to do with new weather, with the color of leaves clinging to trees, with the smoke in the fireplaces of big houses in opulent neighborhoods where I would ride my bike. I half believe that if God lived in one of those neighborhoods, he would invite me in, make me a hot chocolate, and talk to me while his kids played Nintendo and stabbed dirty looks over their shoulders. I would ride around those neighborhoods until my nose froze. Then back home, where I closed myself off in my room, put on Al Green records, and threw open the windows to feel the cold. I would stretch across my bed for hours and imagine life in a big house, visited by important friends who rode new bikes, whose fathers had expensive haircuts and were interviewed on the news. Now, let me stop right there for just a second and say that it was in this moment I wasn't sure if Mr. Donald Miller was a black man. See, I didn't think he was a black man when I picked up the book, but the mere mention of Al Green had me confused there for a second. Okay. Now, spoiler alert, he's not black. I didn't know that until several chapters in. I want to say, hell, how many chapters are in this book? How many chapters are there? There's over 20 chapters. I think there might be about 20 chapters. I probably learned that he wasn't black around chapter 16, okay? Because I wasn't so sure, because he was thinking and talking just like me, and he listened to Al Green. Okay, I'm just saying what I'm saying. Okay, now back to this. Let me go back to where I was. Okay. I have been with my own father only 3 times, each visit happening in my childhood, each visit happening in cold weather. He was a basketball coach, and I do not know why he left my mother. Okay, another reason why I wasn't sure if he was a black man. I know that sounds crazy, but he brought up basketball. He said he was a basketball coach. And God forbid, he said he had left that woman and her child. And now I'm not saying that by no means makes you black. I'm just saying I was confused. Okay. I was at a loss. And I was in a situation where I couldn't Google him. Okay. I'm just telling you how ignorant I was. All right. Okay. Don't judge me. It's Sunday. Now, I only know he was tall and handsome. Again, thought he was black. I only know he was tall and handsome and smelled like beer. His collar smelled like beer, his hands like beer, and his coarse, unshaven face smelled like beer. I do not drink much beer myself, but the depth of the scent has never left me. My friend Tony the Beat Poet, okay, will be drinking a beer at Horse Brass Pub, and the smell will send me to a pleasant place that exists only in recollections of childhood. Again, this man had a friend named Tony the Beat Poet, okay? His real friend, his adult friend, okay, who we'll hear more about Tony the Beat Poet. But I gotta guess that Tony the Beat Poet is black. I don't know these people, but that's what I envision. Okay, I'm just saying. Jackson Tabasco said he was raised in the hood. It sounds like it, don't it? It seemed like it, because Tony the Beat Poet, you can't pay me to believe that he ain't black. But I'm just saying. All right. My father was a big man, I think, bigger than most, stalky and strong like a river at flood. On my second visit to my father, I saw him throw a football across the gym. Again, I'm not going to say anything else. Drilling the spiral into the opposite hoop where it shook the backboard. You ain't going to tell me. Am I the only one? If you was reading this, you wouldn't think this was some athletic black man. I'm just saying. With a friend named Tony the Beat Poet. Okay. All right. There was no action my father committed that I did not study as a work of wonder. I watched as he shaved and brushed his teeth and put on his socks and shoes in motions that were more muscle than grace. And I would stand at his bedroom door, hoping he wouldn't notice my awkward stare. I looked purposely as he opened a beer, the tiny can hiding itself in his big hand, the foam of it spilling over the can, his red lips slurping the excess, his tongue taking the taste from his mustache. He was a brilliant machine of a thing. When my sister and I visited my father, we would eat from the grill every night, which is something we never did with my mother. My father would crumble Ritz crackers into the meat and salt and sauces, and I thought perhaps he was some sort of chef, some sort of person who ought to write books about cooking meat. Later, he would take my sister and me to the grocery store and buy us a toy, any toy we wanted. We paced the long aisle of shiny prizes, the trucks and Barbies and pistols and games. In the checkout line, I'd cling to the shiny, slick box in stillness and silence. On the drive home, we'd take turns sitting on his lap so we could drive. And whoever wasn't steering would work the shifter. And whoever worked the steering wheel could drink from my father's can of beer. Again, this reminded me. Now, look, my daddy was very athletic. My daddy he coached everything. I mean, I don't care what the sport was. He could coach it, and he would at some, points, ways, participate in coaching. My daddy did all the grilling in the house. My daddy drank a lot of beer, okay? And my daddy, when we would make sure that the coast was clear, I told y'all my mom worked second shift, and my dad worked first shift. So I'd be at home with my daddy every evening. So as soon as my mom went to work, me and my daddy would go to the corner store, and he would get him some beer, and he would get me a pop. That's right, a pop. Okay, not no damn soda. We would get pop. Okay. And I might be able to finagle a toy out of that trip to the grocery store. I'm just saying, but nevertheless. Okay. It is not possible to admire a person more than I admired that man. I know from the 3 visits I made to him, the blended composite of love and fear that exists only in a boy's notion of his father. There were years between his calls. My mother would answer the phone, and I knew by the way she stood silently in the kitchen that it was him. A few days later, he would come for a visit, always changed in the showing of his age, the new wrinkles, the grayed hair, and thick skin around his eyes. And within days, we would go to his apartment for the weekend. About the time I entered middle school, he disappeared completely. Today, I wonder why it is God refers to himself as Father at all. This, to me, in light of the earthly representation of the role, seems a marketing mistake. Why would God want to call himself Father when so many fathers abandon their children? As a child, the title Father God offered an ambiguous haze with which to interact. I understood what a father did as well as I understood the task of a shepherd. All the vocabulary about God seemed to come from ancient history, before video games, Palm Pilots, and the internet. Not Palm Pilots. See, that's how long ago this book was written. Palm Pilots. Okay. If you would have asked me, I suppose I would have told you there was a God, but I could not have formulated a specific definition based on my personal experience. Perhaps it was because my Sunday school classes did much to help us memorize commandments and little to teach us who God was and how to relate to him. Or perhaps it was because they did and I wasn't listening. Nevertheless, my impersonal God served me fine my impersonal God served me fine as I had no need of the real thing. I needed no deity to reach out of heaven and wipe my nose, so none of it actually mattered. If God was on a dirt road walking towards me, he was on the other side of a hill, and I hadn't begun to look for him anyway. I started to sin about the time I turned 10. I believe it was 10, although it could have been earlier. But 10 is about the age a boy starts to sin. So I am sure it was in there somewhere. Girls begin to sin when they are 23 or something, but they do life much softer by their very nature, and so needless of a what? So needless of a run at things. I think that's funny. I'm sure he's joking, but the fact that he says boys start sinning at 10 and girls sin much later, I think that is freaking hilarious. Let me see what y'all are saying in here. Um, God said, don't be comparing him to these deadbeats. Right. Well, and here's the thing. I think that's his point too. Because did God say that he's father? See, that's the other thing. Let's just stop and have this quick discussion. See, again, I have always had these different thoughts about God and what we've been taught to believe about God, how we come to believe what we do believe about God. All of these things, I think, play a huge part in, sometimes it plays a part in how we even relate to him, like how we establish a relationship with him. Because here's the thing. Did God call himself Father, or did man refer to him as Father simply because of the society at the time? Because think about, even to this day, men hold a higher status in society than women. Men are the authoritarians in society, in family. And so I think for that reason, a lot of times it's better for us to associate God as Father. But now a lot of people don't like her, but I absolutely love and adore Iyanla Vanzant. And I was reading one of the first books of hers I read was oh gosh, what was it called? I can't believe I can't think of the name of it. But in the book itself, she talks about how it's amazing how we refer to God as Father, when the truth is the nature of who God is, the nurturer that he is, the forgiving, nurturing spirit that God is more like a woman than it is a man. I mean, actually, I can't even disagree with that. So I just wonder, a lot of times what we think about God is what we've been taught to believe about God. I know that there is a Bible, and I do believe in the Bible, but there are aspects of the Bible I'm not completely convinced of. I'll be honest. A lot of people don't like to hear that, but it's my truth. I feel like there's messaging in the Bible that is important. I feel like a lot of the stories in the Bible teach us the lessons that God would have us to believe and learn and know. But the honest God's truth to me is that I feel like a lot of the stories are parables. I know Jesus spoke in parables, but the truth is, I believe Jonah and the whale is a parable. That's just me. I even question Noah's Ark. I question a lot of these things. Okay. So with that said, it's not that the lessons should not be received. I believe that the lessons are real. I believe the lessons are what God would want us to understand and know. But in all honesty, I feel like some of these things are simply parables. I don't believe that Jonah was in the belly of that whale for 3 days. I don't believe that. Not with all the enzymes and things in your mouth and in your digestive system. I'm just saying, I don't believe that you could survive being in the belly of anything. When I think about what's in our own belly and how that breaks things down. Okay. Um, yes, and I now Petty Patty says Jesus said, "In my Father's house there are many mansions." So if you believe in the Bible, you believe that God is the Father. I believe that Jesus related to people in the way they needed to be related to. Now that's just my thought. Now I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just telling you what I believe. I believe there's a lot of things. Um, I just believe, and you really don't want me to go, and we'll probably get there and have this discussion. But I also believe what we know Jesus to have said and done may not have been exactly the way in which it has been told to us. I just, I'm just saying, because man had to write the Bible down over and translate it over and over and over again. There's so many different interpretations of the Bible. And I agree, Miss HLS, that parables were taught by Jesus, right? That's what we've been taught, that Jesus spoke and taught through parables. But I believe that some of these other stories in the Old Testament are also parables. That's just my belief. That's just my belief. I also know that there are several books in the Bible that are missing. There's several books of the Bible that are not included in the Bible that we know to be the Bible. And guess what? Man decided which books would be included and which books would not. Man decided that. Man did. In fact, there was a council of high priests that sat down and made that decision. Not, you know what I'm saying? So, it is what it is. There are many, many missing books. And again, those came from man. Man made that decision. The other thing I would say is, for instance, and then I'll get back to reading. Christians believe in the Trinity, right? That there is God, the Father, Jesus, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. I do not believe in the Trinity. I believe that there is God the Father. I believe that there is Jesus the Son, and I believe in the Holy Ghost. But the Trinity is a concept that all three are one and the same. To me, they're not the same. There is God, who is above all things. And then there is Jesus, who was his son. And then the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit, I believe that that is real as well. But I do not see them as being all three one and the same, because that's the belief of the Trinity, right? But Christians believe this, yet nowhere in the Bible does it say anything about the Trinity. You can't find it anywhere in the Bible. Nowhere. 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 But because that's what we've been taught, somehow we believe it was in the Bible. It's not. So I think that just in the same way that we can be told to believe certain things doesn't make it so. I think that's when you have to have your own relationship with God and be comfortable with your relationship with God. And I know that I'm comfortable with mine. I know how he has worked in my heart, in my mind, in my life. I know how he has spoken to me audibly. as well as in my spirit, also through other people and in the word of God. So it's not that I don't believe in the Bible. I believe in the Bible. I just think that God did not only inspire the words that we know to be the Bible here. He was inspiring people before that, and he inspires people since then. Now, that's just my thoughts. Again, that's why I said this is VLenore Uncut. I know that this is going to make people uncomfortable, and I'm okay with making people uncomfortable because it's not about anybody else's truth but my own. And I'm not even trying to debate or convince anybody of anything. This is just my experience. So, anyway. All right, so where are we? Okay. I'll go back here. Okay. I started to sin about the time I was 10, and I believe it was 10, although it could have been earlier. But 10 is about the age a boy starts to sin. So I am sure it was there somewhere. Girls begin to sin when they are 23 or something, but they do life much softer by their very nature, and so need less of a run at things. I sinned only in bits at first, small lies, little inconsistencies to teachers about homework and that sort of thing. I learned that craft at I learned the craft well, never looking my teacher in the eye, always speaking quickly from the diaphragm, never feeble about the business of deception. Where is your homework? My teacher would ask. I lost it. You lost it yesterday. You lost it last week. I'm terrible about losing things. I need to learn. Always be self deprecating. What am I going to do with you, Donald? I am grateful for your patience. Always be grateful. I should call your mother. She's deaf. Boating accident, piranha. Always be dramatic. Use hand gestures. I also used a great deal of cuss words. Not those churchy cuss words, dang and darn it, or dag nabbit and friggin', but big, robust cuss words, like the ones they use in PG movies, the ones the guys would say only to each other. Cuss words are pure ecstasy when you are 12, buzzing in the mouth like a battery on the tongue. My best friend at the time, Roy, and I would walk home from school, stopping at the playground by the Methodist church to cuss out Travis Massey and his big sister, Patty. Travis always made fun of Roy because his last name was Niswanger. It took me 2 years to understand why the name Niswanger was so funny. Words turned to fists by the end of the wait, words turned to fists by the end of the year, and I was 13 when I took my first punch square in the face. It was Tim Mitchell, the little blonde kid who went to my church. And the whole time we were circling each other, he was saying he was going to give me a fat lip. And I was shouting cuss words in incomplete sentences, scary cuss words. He hit me in the face, and I went down beneath a sky as bright as and blue as jazz music. And there were children laughing, and Patty Massey was pointing her finger, and Roy was embarrassed. There was a lot of yelling after that, and Tim backed down when Roy said he was going to give Tim a fat lip. Travis was singing the whole time. Nice wanger, nice wanger, nice wanger. Before any of this happened, though, when I was in kindergarten, I got sent to the principal's office for looking up a girl's dress during nap time, which is something that I probably did, but not for the not for the immediately considered motive. It's more likely that her open skirt was in the way of something I really wanted to look at because I remembered the age quite well and had no interest whatsoever in what might be up a girl's dress. I received a huge lecture on the importance of being a gentleman from Mr. Golden, who stood just taller than his desk and had a finger that wagged like the tail of a dog and a tie with a knot as big as a tumor. And he might as well have been talking to me about physics or politics because I wasn't interested in whatever it was that I wasn't supposed to be interested in. But everything changed in the summer of my 12th year. Across the street from Roy's house was a large empty field divided by railroad tracks, and it was there that I first identified with the Adam spoken of at the beginning of the Bible, because it was there that I saw my first naked woman. Let me stop right there. Back to this Bible thing and the stories of the Old Testament. You know, if Adam and Eve were the first people, and they created people, right? Do you realize that in the Bible, it starts off talking about Adam and Eve, but then later on in Genesis, it talks about people in faraway lands. Now, where did those people come from? If Adam and Eve are the first people in the world, they're the first humans, right? If they're the first and the only humans, and they had to create humans, where did these other people come from? See, that's what I'm saying. Anyway, let me see what y'all saying in here. The real VB, what you talking about? She's deaf, so don't waste your time calling her. What are we talking about? What are we talking about, y'all? Oh, yeah, he is what? Oh, is that what the question? Was that a question? Yeah, he is white. He says that later on in the book. That's how I figured it out. But see, you see what I'm saying? It's like, do we believe? So if we believe everything in the Bible, did anybody pick up on the fact that there are other people in Genesis that show up that Adam and Eve did not give birth to? I'm just saying. Um, that's what your character said about calling his wife. That's what your character said about calling his wife. Huh? Child, you know I'm slow. V, that's what you read. Yeah. Oh, yeah. About the man being a white man. Mm-hmm. Not wife, but calling his mother about missing homework. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. V talking about his excuses. Oh, yeah, yeah. He's funny. I think actually the way he writes is very funny. Okay. All right, let's go. Let's get back into it. But do y'all see my point? Yes, Jesus did refer to God as the Father, but so if we're going based on the Bible, what happened to them people? Where did people come from? Where did people come from in Genesis? Okay. And if look, I got all kinds of questions. So, but never mind. We can talk about this some other time. We're getting off track. I'm getting off track. Okay, where are we at? Nice winger, nice winger. Large empty field, railroad tracks. Okay. Okay, let me just go back here because I don't remember where I left off here. Okay. Across the street from Roy's house was a large empty field divided by railroad tracks, and it was there that I first identified with the Adam spoken at the beginning of the Bible, because it was there that I saw my first naked woman. We were playing with our bikes when Roy stumbled across a magazine whose pages were gaudily dressed in colorful type and the stuff of bad advertising. Roy approached the magazine with a stick, and I stood behind him as he flipped the pages from the distance of a twig. We had found a portal, it seemed, into a world of magic and wonder, where creatures exist in the purest form of beauty. I say we found a portal, but it was something more than that. It was as if we were being led through a portal because I sensed in my chest, in the pace of my heart, that I was having an adventure. I felt the way a robber might feel when he draws a gun inside a bank. At last, Roy confronted the magazine by hand, slowly devouring its pages, handing it to me after diving deeper into the woods, off the trail common to us and our bikes. We were not speaking, only turning the pages, addressing the miraculous forms, the beauty that has not been matched in all mountains and rivers. I felt that I was being shown a secret that everybody in the world had always known and had kept from me. We were there for hours until the sunset, at which time we hid our treasure beneath logs and branches, each swearing to the other that we would tell no one of our find. That night in bed, my mind played the images over as a movie, and I felt the nervous energy of a river furling through my lower intestines, ebbing the tides against the gray matter of my mind, delivering me into a sort of ecstasy from which I felt I would never return. This new information seemed to give grass its green and sky its blue. And now, before I had requested a reason to live, one had been delivered: naked women. So, them little nasty boys found them a book of dirty, naked women's. Okay. All this gave way to my first encounter with guilt, which is still something entirely inscrutable, inscrutable to me, as if aliens were sending transmissions from another planet telling me there is a right and wrong in the universe. And it wasn't only sexual sin that brought about feelings of guilt. It it was lies and mean thoughts and throwing rocks at cars with Roy. My life had become something to hide. There were secrets in it. My thoughts were private thoughts. My lies were barriers that protected my thoughts. My sharp tongue, a weapon to protect the ugly me. I would lock myself in my room, isolating myself from my sister and my mother, not often do any sort of sinning, but simply because I had become a creature of odd secrecy. This is where my early ideas about religion came into play. The ideas I learned in Sunday school, the ideas about sin and how we shouldn't sin kept bugging me. I felt as though I needed to redeem myself the way a kid feels when he finally decides to clean his room. My carnal thinking had made a had made a mess of my head, and I felt as though I were standing in the doorway of my mind, wondering where to begin, how to organize my thoughts so they weren't so out of control. That's when I realized that religion might be able to, might be able to hose things down, get me back to normal so I could have fun without feeling guilty or something. I just didn't want to have to think about the guilt crap anymore. For me, however, there was a mental wall between religion and God. I could walk around inside religion and never, on any sort of emotional level, understand that God was a person, an actual being with thoughts and feelings and that sort of thing. To me, God was more of an idea. It was something like a slot machine, a set of spinning images that that doled, doled out rewards based on behavior and perhaps chance. The slot machine God provided a relief for the pinging guilt and a sense of hope that my life would get organized towards a purpose. I was so dumb to test the merit of the slot machine God. I simply began to pray for forgiveness, thinking the cherries might line up and the light atop the machine would flash, spilling shiny tokens of good faith. What I was doing was more in line with superstition than spirituality, but it worked. If something nice happened to me, I thought it was God. And if something nice didn't, I went back to the slot machine, knelt down in prayer, and pulled the lever a few more times. I like this God very much because you hardly had to talk to it and it never talked back. But the fun never lasts. My slot machine God disintegrated on Christmas Eve when I was 13. I still think of that night as the lifting of the haze, and it remains one of the few times I can categorically claim an interaction with God. Though I am half certain these interactions are routine, they simply don't feel as metaphysical as the happenings of that night. It was very simple, but it was one of those profound revelations that only God can induce. What happened was that I realized I was not alone in my own surroundings. I'm not talking about ghosts or angels or anything. I'm talking about other people. As silly as it sounds, I realized late that night that other people had feelings and fears, and that my interactions with him actually meant something, that I could make them happy or sad in the way that I associated with them. Not only could I make them happy or sad, but I was responsible for the way I interacted with them. I suddenly felt responsible. I was supposed to make them happy. I was not supposed to make them sad. Like I said, it sounds simple, but when you really get to it for the first time, it hits hard. I was shell shocked. This is how the bomb fell. For my mother that year, I had purchased a shabby Christmas gift, a book, the contents of which she would never be interested in. I had had a sum of money with which to buy presents, and the majority of it I used to buy fishing equipment, as Roy and I had started fishing in the creek behind Walmart. My extended family opens gifts on Christmas Eve, leaving the immediate family to open gifts the next morning. And so in my room, the night, wait, I'm sorry. And so in my room that night were wonderful presents, toys, games, candy, and clothes. And as I lay in bed, I counted and categorized them in the moonlight. The battery operated toys of greatest importance, the underwear of no consequence at all. So in the moonlight, I drifted in and out of anxious sleep. And this is when it occurred to me that the gift I had purchased for my mother was bought with the petty change left after I had pleased myself. I realized I had set the happiness of my mother beyond my own material desires. This was a different sort of guilt from anything I'd previously experienced. It was a heavy guilt, not the sort of guilt that I could do anything about. It was a haunting feeling, the sort of sensation you get when you wonder whether you are two people, the other of which, I'm sorry, wait. It was a haunting feeling, the sort of sensation you get when you wonder whether you are two people, the other of which does things you can't explain, bad and terrible things. The guilt was so heavy that I fell out of bed onto my knees and begged not a slot machine God, but a living, feeling God to stop the pain. I crawled out of my room and into the hallway by my mother's door and lay on my elbows and face for an hour or so, going sometimes into sleep before finally the burden lifted and I was able to return to my room. We opened the rest of our gifts the next morning, and I was pleased to receive what I did. But when my mother opened her silly book, I asked her forgiveness, saying how much I wished I had done more. She, of course, pretended to enjoy the gift, saying how she wanted to know about the subject. I was still feeling terrible that evening when the family gathered for dinner around the table, so full of food a kingdom could feast. I sat low in my chair, eye level with the bowls of potatoes and corn, having my hair straightened by 10 talking women, all happy the holiday had come to a close. And while they ate and talked and chatted away another Christmas, I felt ashamed and wondered silently whether they knew they were eating with Hitler. Okay, so that was chapter one, everybody. Let's see. What are y'all saying? Um, let me see. I wasn't looking at the chat, so let's see. What y'all saying? Um, Oh, you need to know his nationality. He's an American white man. Okay. He is totally an American white man. Jackson, Tabasco. Hey, the woman he chose. Hey, V, I'm excited about this reading. Yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed reading this. Look, we've already lost, child. We keep losing people, but I figured as much. Um, it is what it is. And I knew once I started telling people what I be thinking, about God and stuff, child, I know I'm gonna lose some people. I'm not disgusting. Yes, Shay a whole American white man, child. Mm-hmm. But and that's what I was. I mean, I so earlier on when he talked about his dad and how he saw his father, and look, I was raised with both my parents in the house. Okay, both of my parents were very present in my life until they passed away. Um, but as much as I would be the first to like argue people down about the idea about black men in the house, the fact that he was talking about his dad being very athletic and being very um uh, basically he didn't grow up with his father in the house, and his father was a drinker, excuse me, and evidently a deadbeat. I have to say I was thinking he might be black. The fact that he was just different things he would say made me think, is he black? He was talking about Al Green. He had this daddy. He had, just all this stuff he was saying made me think he might have been black, but he ain't black, child. And there's other things throughout the way he talks and thinks and jokes and just different things he would say made me think that he black. Like it had me questioning it until finally it's later in the book where he just outright says, he's a white man. But yeah, he's white, American white man. Mm-hmm. Show is. I can say, I'll tell you, he lives in, well, I don't know if he still lives there, but he was raised in Portland, in Oregon. So, Shaby said he's from some blue-eyed, soulful people, right? You would think that. That's the way I think it. From the way he talks throughout this book, it just connects with me. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so that is chapter 1. Let me see. Should I continue? Um, should I? Okay, yeah, I'll read a little bit more. So now we'll move on to chapter 2, which is called Problems. What I learned on television. Some people skip through life. Some people are dragged through it. I sometimes wonder whether we are moving through time or time is moving through us. My brilliant friend Mitch says that light, unlike anything else in the universe, is not affected by time. Light, he says, exists outside of time. He tells me it has something to do with how fast it travels and that it is eternal, but it is still a mystery to physicists. I say this only because time kept traveling through me. When I was young, I thought I had forever to figure things out. I am talking about feeling like Hitler, but I didn't. I didn't have long to figure things out. I believe that the greatest trick of the devil is not to get us into some sort of evil, but rather have us wasting time. This is why the devil tries so hard to get Christians to be religious. If he can sink a man's mind into habit, he will prevent his heart from engaging God. Now, if that ain't a word right there, now that's a word, because we religious people and religion in and of itself is all about rituals and habits and doctrine and staying within code, if you ask me. But spirituality and relationship, it spans farther and past the word itself. It's not enough to just follow rules and to keep up with habits and rituals. It's all about relationship. And look, this is what I know. I know that when I think about the things and the people I love the most, right? I think about my child. I love him from the bottom of my heart. There's nothing he can do, say, there's nothing that can keep me from loving him. Nothing. And because of my relationship with him, I always want to do things for his benefit, right? Or I think about, let me not say my child. Let's just say, if you have a friendship with somebody, if you have a love relationship with someone, whether it be, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, whatever it is, right? When you're in a relationship with somebody, no one has to tell you what the rules are in that relationship. If you love that person, your actions are just going to show up as someone who loves that person. Like, you don't have to tell me not to not to cheat on them, because if I love them, I'm going to do everything in my power. I'm not going to have a desire to cheat. I'm not going to do anything to cause them pain. I'm going to try my hardest to ensure that they're happy. And no one needs to tell me how to do that. I'm just going to do it because I love them. And I think that that's what our relationship with God should look like. If you're really in relationship with God, then you're not going to need someone to lay out the rules of the relationship. Your heart is going to dictate your actions in that relationship. And it's not to say that we aren't to pay attention to the word, and that we're not supposed to learn more about God so that we have a better understanding of what our love will look like or should show up as. I'm just saying, in general, I don't need a rule book to show up that way. Does that make sense? So for me, it says a lot. Yeah, the woman he chose said he definitely said something right there. That's facts. So let me see. Where was I? Hitler. Okay. All right. Hi, Siri Colette. Okay. Let me get back here. Okay. I say this only because time kept traveling through me. When I was young, I thought I had forever to figure things out. I'm talking about feeling like Hitler, but I didn't. I didn't have long to figure things out. I believe that the greatest trick of the devil is not to get us into some sort of evil, but rather have us wasting time. This is why the devil tries so hard to get Christians to be religious. If he can sink a man's mind into habit, he will prevent his heart from engaging God. I was into habit. I grew up going to church, so I got used to hearing about God. He was like Uncle Harry or Aunt Sally, except we didn't have pictures. God never sent presents either. We had this dumpy house and dumpy car, and I had zits. Looking back, I suppose God sent sunsets and forests and flowers, but what is that to a kid? The only thing I heard from God was what I heard on Christmas Eve. That story I told you, when God made me feel so guilty, and I didn't like that at all. I didn't feel like I knew God, and yet he was making me experience this conviction. I felt that the least he could have done was to come down and introduce himself and explain these feelings of conviction in person. Now let me say this. This is what I grew up in church too. I grew up in church, and I grew up, and not only did I grow up in church, I grew up in a Baptist church. And then I also went to Catholic school. So I went to Catholic school from kindergarten through 12th grade. So 13 years of my life was in Catholic school. While at the same time, here I am going to church, my Baptist church, and I'm involved in the choir. I was in the Guild Girls, and you name it. I was at Bible study. I was at church at least 4 days a week, and on Sundays all day long. Okay. And then I'm going to this Christian school, right? And while the belief systems were, obviously everybody believed in God. They're all teaching me about God from different perspectives. But nevertheless, I am I'm aware of God. I believe in God, but I wasn't in relationship with God. But often, especially in church, not so much in school, but in church, there was all this talk about being in relationship with God, right? So in my mind, being in relationship with God meant doing what we're told we're supposed to do and avoiding doing the things you're not supposed to do, right? Following the rules of being a Christian. I'm a kid, right? I'm a kid. And even through high school, I'm a kid. I'm trying to follow the rules of being a Christian. But I wasn't in relationship. I was following the rules as much as possible. And then in the moments when I felt like I wasn't maybe I had broken a rule, whether that was telling a lie or sneaking out and going with my friends one place, as opposed to, telling my parents I'm going somewhere else. That's a lie, right? In those moments, I felt conviction, kind of like what he's talking about. I felt conviction about those things. And I felt like those things separate you from God when you are not in alignment with the rules. I went through all of those same feelings too. It wasn't until I was like 28 years old when I realized what it meant to be in relationship with God. It wasn't until I was about 28 years old when I realized that I had never really heard from God. It was then when I did hear from God. And what I'll tell you was the defining moment for me was I was going through a divorce. So here I was, I got pregnant, Jesus. I got married, and a year after getting married, my husband and I actually were breaking up. Now I didn't get a divorce. I shouldn't say I was going through a divorce. I thought I was. I thought we were about to get a divorce, but this is a year into our marriage, and things were falling apart, child. And it was in that moment when I felt broken and just hurt. And I'm going back to, I'm praying. Now, it's not to say that I wasn't praying and I wasn't reading the word. I was doing all of those things. I was in church. I was, all of those things, following the rules, if you will. I was following the rules. I was going to church. I was going to Bible study. I was reading the word. I was doing all the stuff that you're supposed to do. I was following the rules. But that didn't mean I was really hearing from God. I wasn't really in relationship with him. But as he and I were, here I am in this situation where my husband and I are breaking apart. We actually got separated a year after getting married. And it was my mother-in-law actually um who introduced me, if you will, to Iyanla Van Zant, and had given me the one day my soul just opened up. That's the name of the book. It's 40 days and 40 nights of spiritual meditations. And in there, Iyanla sort of starts off the book talking much like how he's talking, like what she believed God to be. Like the wrath of God is what you're afraid of. And that was kind of what I thought of God. Like God was this disciplinarian who, if I got out of line, he was going to, his wrath would come over me, right? So I was fearful of God, because in the Bible it says to fear God, right? It wasn't until later on I learned that the word fear in the Bible does not mean to be afraid of. See, that's the thing. So many people are reading the Bible without a clear understanding of what that means. To fear, the fear of fearing God in the Bible really means to love. It means to love. And I was taking it literal, as I was afraid of God. And in many cases, I felt that there were aspects, people in the church, even my own parents, led me to believe if I wasn't doing right, I better fear God, because God was going to, his wrath was going to come over me. And I needed to be afraid of that. But I think that it wasn't until I opened myself up and really just begged God to speak to me, give me direction, to speak to my heart, to take away anything. I think this was the first time I really wholeheartedly asked God, remove whatever is in my life that is keeping me from him, and only add to my life what he would approve of. And that I needed a word from God to explain to me what I needed to do next. It wasn't until those moments came is when I started to hear from God. Like literally, it was no mistaking it. And I will share those things with you, in the future. But there it came a time when it was very clear God was speaking to me directly. It was no if, ands, buts, no confusion to be had. Okay. He was clear as a bell. There were times when he spoke audibly to me, an experience I'd never had prior. But I was in a different space. I was at a different maturity level. I was at a different time where I was most vulnerable and most open. So it was very different. Hey, Miss Lorraine. So yeah, so it was just a different. I was just in a different space. Hi, Gemini 64. Great live, giving thumbs up. Blessings to all. Oh, thank you, Gemini. I'm telling you, we're gonna lose people, honey. People ain't gonna want to be over here with me. I'm sure I've pissed some people off already, child. Because I'm just saying. But that's why I'm having it on the VLenore Uncut page, child. Uh, but okay. So where was that, child? Let me see. I suppose. I suppose God self and explain these feelings. Okay. All right. If you don't love somebody, it gets annoying when they tell you what to do or what to feel. When you love them, you get pleasure from their pleasure, and it makes it easy to serve. I didn't love God because I didn't know God. And that's what I learned later. Let me just say this. That's Child, this is why this hit me so hard. Because here I was, this person who had grown up in the church, who followed the rules. And yet I was 28 years old when I realized that I didn't love God before that moment. I realized in that moment that I didn't love him. I wanted to, but how do you love someone or something you don't know? So it wasn't that I didn't want to love. You know what I'm saying? It was a matter of, oh, wow, this is what love looks like. You can't love something you don't know and that you're not in relationship with. Right? Hell, I love some chicken and dressing, okay? Because I was in relationship with that thing. You know what I'm saying? I knew that thing intimately. Okay. But it wasn't until I was a grown adult going to going through some real grown experience and finally at a space where I was most vulnerable and open and really asking God to show up for me and to show up in my life in a way where I could get to know him on a different level. You know what I'm saying? So that's where I was. Hey, Lexi. So that's kind of where that's why this hit me, because I was like, "Ooh, baby, I know what he's talking about." When he says, I didn't love God because I didn't know God. See, I knew of him and I knew what I was supposed to feel about him, and I was following the rules, but was that love? Or was that fear? Was it fear? It was fear, y'all, for me. It was fear. I was afraid that if I didn't love or if I didn't follow these rules, that he was going to send me straight to hell. And that's where I was. That's not a relationship. So for me, I understood exactly what he was saying in this part. So, okay. Still, I knew because of my own feelings, there was something wrong with me. And I knew it wasn't only me. I knew it was everybody. It was like a bacteria or a cancer or a trance. It wasn't on the skin, it was in the soul. It showed itself in loneliness, lust, anger, jealousy, and depression. Ooh, hallelujah. Uh, oh, Jesus. It had People screwed up bad everywhere you went, at the store, at home, at church. It was ugly and deep. Lots of singers on the radio were singing about it, and cops had jobs because of it. It was as if we were broken, I thought, as if we were never supposed to feel these sticky emotions. It was as if we were cracked, couldn't love right, couldn't feel good things for very long without screwing it all up. We were all like gasoline engines running on diesel. I was just a kid, so I couldn't put words to it. But every kid feels it. I'm talking about the broken quality of life. A kid will think there are monsters under his bed, or he will close himself in his room when his parents fight. From a very early age, our souls are taught there is a comfort and a discomfort in the world, a good and bad, if you will, a lovely and a frightening. There seems to me to be too much frightening, and I didn't know why it existed. I was recently reminded about all of this. It started while I was watching television. I lived with four other guys, pretty cool guys, in a pretty cool house in Laurelhurst. I have this killer room upstairs. It is tucked away from everybody, sort of hidden through a door in the back of the upstairs den. The walls in my room are cedar, like something you'd find in a wood cabin. There is a birch tree so big and dignified outside the window that I often feel I am in its limbs. In the evening, when it rains, the birch sounds like an audience giving a standing ovation. Sometimes, when the tree is clapping, I stand at the window and say thank you, as if I'm Napoleon. Along my wood paneled walls are small wood paneled doors that open into attic space. I stuck a television inside one of these doors, and in the evening, I lie in bed and watch television. When you are a writer and a speaker, you aren't supposed to watch television. It's shallow. I feel guilty because for a long time I didn't allow myself a television, and I used to drop that fact in conversation to impress people. I thought it made me sound dignified. A couple of years ago, however, I visited a church in the suburbs, and there was this blowhard preacher talking about how television rots your brain. He said that when we are watching television, our minds are working no harder than when we are sleeping. I thought that sounded heavenly. I bought one that afternoon. He cracks me up, okay? His humor to me is the kind of shit I laugh at, okay? I'm just saying. And you heard when he was talking about cussing and stuff? You know, he connected with me immediately, all right? He said as a kid he was cussing, okay? You know, I love him. This is a man after my own heart, okay? All right? David was a man after God's own heart, and this man right here is after mine. Okay, that's all I'm saying. All right. Um, I'm sorry. Hold on one second. So, cousin Brian said, I've read this book. It's stupid and pointless. Really? Well, cousin Brian, you shouldn't even be here then, baby. Okay. You should probably leave because evidently you didn't read it because he's very clear about Christianity, and I'm thinking you're probably the devil himself in this chat. Okay. So if this isn't for you, you should leave. Otherwise, we will escort you out. Okay. Now I'm just telling you that right now. Okay. Now, I don't know if you are the devil, but this is God's land over here, and we are God's people. All right. So goodbye and so long. Okay. All right. Now let's get back into this. Let's see, where was I? Still, I knew because my own feelings. Child, I lost my place. Himself and explains those feelings in person. Somebody. Okay. Still, I knew because of my own feelings there was something wrong with me, and I knew it wasn't only me. Oh, wait, I read that part. Okay. In the wrong place there. Let me go over here. And okay, yeah, right here. Okay. So I've been watching Nightline with Ted Koppel. Child, so there you go right there. That's how old this shit is, okay? Not Ted Koppel and Nightline. Okay. And back to it. So I've been watching Nightline with Ted Koppel lately. He isn't as smart as Ray Suarez, but he tries, and that counts. He's been in the Congo and Africa, and it has been terrible. I mean, the show is fine, but the Congo isn't doing so well. More than 2.5 million people have been killed in the last 3 years. Each of eight tribes, each of eight tribes is at war with the other seven. Genocide. As the images moved across the screen, I would lie in bed feeling so American and safe, as if the Congo were something in a book or a movie. It is nearly impossible for me to process the idea that such a place exists in the same world as Portland. I met with Tony the Beat Poet. See, I told you, here come Tony the Beat Poet. Okay. Tony the Beat Poet the other day at Horse Brass and told him about the stuff on Nightline. I knew that was taking place over there, Tony said, but I didn't know it was that bad. I call Tony a beat poet because he is always wearing loose European shirts, the ones that lace up in the chest with shoestring. That sounds like a dashiki to me. But anyhow, that's another reason why I thought he was black. But anyway, his head is shaved and he has a long soul patch that stretches a good inch beneath his chin. That sounds black to me. That sounds like a anyway. He isn't actually a poet. It's terrible, I told him. 2.5 million people dead. In one village, they interviewed about 50 or so women. All of them had been raped, most of them numerous times. Tony shook his head. That is amazing. It is so difficult to even process how things like that can happen. I know. I can't get my mind around it. I keep wondering how people could do things like that. Do you think you could do something like that, Don? Tony looked at me pretty seriously. I honestly couldn't believe he was asking the question. What are you talking about? I asked. Are you capable of murder or rape or any of the stuff that is taking place over there? No. So you are not capable of any of those things? He asked again. He packed his pipe and looked at me to confirm my answer. No, I couldn't, I told him. What are you getting at? I just want to know what makes those guys over there any different from you and me. They are human. We are human. Why are we any better than them? You know? Tony had me on this one. If I answered his question by saying yes, I could commit those atrocities, that would make me evil. But if I answered no, it would suggest I believed I'm better evolved than some of the men in the Congo. And then I would have some explaining to do. You believe we are capable of those things, don't you, Tony? He lit his pipe and breathed in until the tobacco glowed orange and let out a cloud of smoke. I think so, Don. I don't know how else to answer that question. What you are really saying is that we have a sin nature, like the fundamentalist Christians say. Tony shook the pipe from his lips. Pretty much, Don. It just explains a lot, you know? Actually, I told him reluctantly, I have always agreed with the idea that we have a sin nature. I don't think it looks exactly like the fundamentalists say it does, because I know so many people who do great things, but I do buy the idea we are flawed, that there is something in us that is broken. I think it is easier to do bad things than good things. And there is something in that basic fact, some little clue to the meaning of the universe. It's funny how little we think about it, isn't it? Tony shook his head. It really is everywhere, isn't it? By this, we were talking about the flawed nature of our existence. Yeah, Tony started in. Some friends were over at the house and they have a kid about 4 or 5 years old or something. And they were telling me all about child training. They said their kid had this slight problem telling them the truth about whether or not he had broken something or whether or not he had put away his toys, things like that. So later I started wondering why we have why we have to train kids at all. I wondered, you know, if I ever had a couple of kids and I trained one of them, taught them right from wrong, and the other I didn't train at all, I wonder which would be the better kid. The kids you teach right from wrong, of course, I told him. Of course. But that really should tell us something about the human condition. We have to be taught to be good. It doesn't come completely natural. In my mind, that's a flaw in the human condition. Here's one, I said, agreeing with him. Why do we need cops? We would have chaos without cops, Tony said matter of factly. Just look at the countries with corrupt police. It's anarchy. Anarchy, I repeated. Anarchy, Tony confirmed in sort of a laugh. Sometimes I think, you know, if there were no cops, I would be fine. And I probably would. I was taught right from wrong when I was a kid. But the truth is, I drive completely different when there is a cop behind me than when there isn't. And what Tony and I were talking about is true. It is hard for us to admit we have a sin nature because we live in the system of checks and balances. If we get caught, we will get punished. But that doesn't make us good people. It only makes us subdued. Just like about the Congress and Senate, just think about the Congress and Senate and even the president. The genius of the American system is not freedom. The genius of the American system is checks and balances. Nobody gets all the power. Everybody is watching everybody else. It is as if the founding fathers knew intrinsically that the soul of a man unwatched is perverse. Now, if that ain't the truth, child, if that ain't the truth, it is the truth. Let me see. Hold on, y'all. I'll make sure. Okay. All right. Earlier that afternoon, the afternoon I got together with Tony, my friend Andrew, the protester, and I went downtown to protest a visit by the president. I felt that Bush was blindly supporting the World Bank and to some degree felt the administration was responsible for what was happening in Argentina. Andrew and I made signs and showed up a few hours early. Thousands of people had already gathered, most of them protesting our policy towards Iraq. Andrew and I took pictures of ourselves in front of the cops, loads of cops, all in riot gear like stormtroopers from Star Wars. Again, I know this is ignorant. I know this is ignorant, but this is another reason why I thought this man could have been black, because he clearly has some real issues with the Republican Party. I'm just saying. Now I know that there are some black folks that are Republicans, and I know that there are some good black people who are Republicans. I'm just saying that it seemed to me, with all of these things he keeps throwing out here, he sound real black-like. Okay, but I'm just saying. Okay. Andrew Syme said, stop America's terrorism. He spelled terrorism wrong. I felt empowered in the sea of people, most of whom were also carrying signs and chanting against corporations who were making slaves of third world labor, and the Republican Party, who gives those corporations so much power and freedom. I felt so far from my upbringing, from my narrow former self, the me who was taught the Republicans give a crap about the cause of Christ. I felt a long way from the pre-me, the pawn Christian who was a Republican because my family was Republican, not because I had prayed and asked God to enlighten me about issues concerning the entire world rather than just America. When the president finally showed, things got heated. The police mounted horses and charged them into the crowd to push us back. We shouted in unison that a horse is not a weapon, but they didn't listen. The president's limo turned the corner so quickly I thought he might come tumbling out, and his car was followed by a caravan of shiny black vans and Suburbans. They shuttled him around to a back door where we watched through a chain link fence as he stepped out of his limousine, shook hands with dignitaries, and entered the building amid a swarm of Secret Service agents. I was holding my sign very high in case he looked our way. The president gave his speech inside the hotel and left through a side door, and they whisked him away before we could shake his hands and explain our concerns. When we were done, I started wondering if we had accomplished anything. I started wondering whether we could actually change the world. I mean, of course, we could. We could change our buying habits, elect socially conscious representatives, and that sort of thing. But I honestly don't believe we will be solving the greater human conflict with our efforts. The problem is not a certain type of legislation or even a certain politician. The problem is the same that it has been, that it has always been. I am the problem. I think every person who is awake to the functioning principles within the reality has a moment where he stops blaming the problems in the world on groupthink, on humanity and authority, and starts to face himself. I hate this more than anything. This is the hardest principle within Christian spirituality for me to deal with. The problem is not out there. The problem is the needy beast of a thing that lives in my chest. The thing I realized on the day we protested, on the day I had beers with Tony, was that it did me no good to protest Americans' responsibility in global poverty when I wasn't even giving money to my church, which has a terrific homeless ministry. I started feeling very much like a hypocrite. More than my questions about the efficacy of social action were my questions about my own motives. Do I want social justice for the oppressed, or do I just want to be known as a socially active person? I spend 95% of my time thinking about myself anyway. I don't have to watch evening news to see that the world is bad. I only have to look at myself. I am not browbeating myself here. I am only saying that truth change, true life giving, God honoring change would have to start with the individual. I was the very problem I had been protesting. I wanted to make a sign that read, I am the problem. That night, after Tony and I talked, I rode my motorcycle up to Mount Tabor, this dormant volcano just east of the Hawthorne district. There is a place near the top where you can sit and look at the city at night, smoldering the coals and ashes beneath the evergreens, laid out like jewels under the moon. It is really something beautiful. I went there to try to get my head around this idea that the problem in the universe lives within me. I can't think of anything more progressive than the embrace of this fundamental idea. There is a poem by the literary critic C.S. Lewis that is more or less a confession. The first time I read it, I identified so strongly with his sentiments. I felt as though somebody were calling my name. I always come back to this poem when I think soberly about my faith, about the general precepts of Christian spirituality, the beautiful precepts that indicate we are flawed. All of us are flawed. The corrupt politician and the pious, and the pious Sunday school teacher. In the poem, C.S. Lewis faces himself. He addresses his own depravity with a soulful sort of bravery. So here's the poem. All this is flashy rhetoric about loving you. I never had a selfless thought since I was born. I am mercenary and self-seeking through and through. I want God, you, all friends, merely to serve my turn. Peace, reassurance, pleasure are the goals I seek. I cannot crawl 1 inch outside my proper skin. I talk of love. A scholar's parrot may talk Greek, but self-imprisoned always end where I begin. I sat there above the city, wondering if I was like the parrot in Lewis's poem, swinging in my cage, reciting Horner, all the while having no idea what I was saying. I talk about love, forgiveness, social justice. I rage against American materialism in the name of altruism. But have I even controlled my own heart? The overwhelming majority of time I spend thinking about myself, pleasing myself, reassuring myself. And when I'm done, there is nothing to spare for the needy. 6 billion people live in this world, and I can only muster thoughts for one, me. I know someone who has twice cheated on his wife, whom I don't know. He told me he told me this over coffee because I was telling him how I thought perhaps man was broken, how for man doing good and moral things was like swimming upstream. He wondered if God had mysteriously told me about his infidelity. He squirmed a bit and then spoke to me as if I was a priest. He confessed everything. I told him I was sorry, that it sounded terrible, and it did sound terrible. His body was convulsed in guilt and self hatred. He said he would lie down next to his wife at night, feeling walls of concrete between their hearts. He has secrets. She tries to love him, but he knows he doesn't deserve it. He cannot accept her affection because she is loving a man who doesn't exist. He plays a role. He says he is an actor in his own home. Designed for good, my friend was sputtering and throwing smoke. The soul was not designed for this, I thought. We were supposed to be good, all of us. We were supposed to be good. For a moment, sitting there above the city, I imagined life outside of narcissism. I wondered how beautiful it might be to think of others as more important than myself. I wondered at how peaceful it might be not to be pestered by the childish voice that wants for pleasure and attention. I wondered what it would be like not to live in a house of mirrors. Everywhere I go, being reminded of myself. It began to rain that night on Mount Tabor. I rode my motorcycle home in the weather, which I hate doing because the streets were so slick. I got home white knuckled and wet. My room was warm and inviting, and it always is with wood panels and dignified birch outside the window. I sat on my bed and looked out at my tree, which by this time was gathering rain in applause. I didn't feel much like Napoleon that night. I didn't like being reminded about how self absorbed I was. I wanted to be over this, done with this. I didn't want to live in a broken world or a broken me. I wasn't trying to weasel out of anything. I just wasn't in the mood to be on earth that night. I get like this sometimes when it rains and when I see certain movies. I put on the new Wilco album, turned it up, and went into the bathroom to wash my hands and face. I know now from experience that the path to joy winds through this dark valley. I think every well adjusted human being has dealt squarely with his or her own depravity. I realize this sounds very Christian, very fundamentalist, and browbeating, but I want to tell you this part of what the Christians are saying is true. I think Jesus feels strongly about communicating the idea of our brokenness, and I think it is worth reflection. Nothing is going to change in the Congo until you and I figure out what is wrong with the person in the mirror. All right. So that is the end of chapter 2. Any thoughts? Anybody have any thoughts? I will just say that the way this is written for me is so down to earth and honest, transparent. Um, he's really being very self-reflective throughout, and I appreciate that. I think that throughout this book we'll have a chance to think about the things that we've been taught, the things that we have thought, things that we have found to be true for ourselves, things that have not shown up as truth in our experiences. And I don't think there's any right or wrong to it, you know. Hey, Char Willie. Hey, Southside Chi-Town. So that I'm hoping that, you know, as we continue, and those of you that decide to get the book, again, you do not have to get the book. I'm going to read the book so we can just have these discussions as we go. We've gotten through chapters 1 and 2 today. I'm not going to guarantee that every time we meet, we'll get through a whole chapter or multiple chapters. I think we can do this however we feel we want to, you know, if we want to stop and have some discussion around it. And look, this book may not touch anybody the way it touched me. Hell, we might just be reading this for me again, okay? And I'm okay with that. I just know that it really helped me in many ways. Like I said, it validated some of the things I felt in the past. And let me just tell you this. While I have had some thoughts, and I'll put it to you this way. He brings this all full circle. he even brings it back to the things that he was once taught. Now he gets why he was taught those things. Like, he makes some realizations at the end. Some of the realizations he's made, I have not, you know. My I would say 85% of what he says in this book is what I think he and I are on the same page with. There's 15% things that I once believed I don't believe anymore. I just don't. And that's just, but I don't want to be condemned for what I don't believe that you may believe, and vice versa. I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I just think that it's an opportunity for us to share and learn from one another, and hopefully grow together on some level. Let's see. Sarah Colette said, I appreciate you introducing this book to us. No, thank you. I look, I appreciate it having been introduced to me. It was nothing but God that literally made this book pop out of that bookshelf that day when I saw it. So yes, thank you, Sarah Colette. Hey, Prima Wanda. I believed as well that I'm supposed to fear God. Yeah, I mean, I thought, the way it was, I always felt like even my mom would be like, you better, God sees you, and that's true. Yes, God does see everything, right? But God's not all about just punishing us. God is, but I feel like sometimes parents, without meaning to, or even the church without necessarily meaning to, they use fear to keep us in line, or to keep us on the path that whomever it is that's trying to put us on the path, to keep us on the path they want us to be on, right? And that's why I personally, again, y'all ain't got some look. Some folks ain't gonna like when I say this, but this is why I question, dare I say, this is why I question why Christianity was even introduced to us as a whole. And when I say us, I'm specifically talking about Black people. And I'll tell you why I say this. Africans, while there is a small percentage of people in Africa that practiced Christianity prior to us, the good majority of us coming over here were introduced to Christianity. There was a small, very small percentage of people that practice Christianity in Africa. Okay. So if you are of the belief that you are descendants of Africans, and that you were brought, that our ancestors were brought over here, then 9 times out of 10, most of our people were not practicing Christianity. Okay, that's the first thing. If you are of the belief that you, or if you are of the knowledge that you are descendants of, or that your ancestors were here in this land, because all Black people were not brought over here on the ship. This is true. All of us weren't brought over here on the ship. There were Black people already in America, in this land, but they were what? Native Americans, right? They too did not practice Christianity, correct? Okay. So I say all that to say that people of color, generally speaking, were not practicing Christianity. But these evildoers, these people who had enslaved us, whether they be the folks that came over from Africa, or the people, the dark people of this land right here in America, that means we weren't practicing Christianity. But these evildoers who enslaved us gave us Christianity. They just handed it over to us, and they wanted us so badly to practice this religion. Why would they do that. Why would they do that? Actually, Fedora, there were some Native Americans who were Black. There were many Native Americans who were Black, which is another reason why they enslaved them folks too, right? They stole from them. They raped their people, and they stripped them or raped them of not only their bodies but of everything they had. And these real nice evil white people who came over here and did all of this, they gave us Christianity. Now, that in and of itself should at least cause you to question, how do evil people push a loving God or a loving religion onto these people? Well, they did that to keep us in line, right? And if you noticed, the language in the Bible, again, this is a Bible. Again, a lot of people don't even realize that there are books that were left out of the Bible. A lot of people don't even realize how the books that are in the Bible were selected to be in the Bible. And that was because a whole nother panel of white folks sat down and came to a conclusion together that this is what we're going to put in here. And that's why I say King James. See, I got questions about King James's ass. Okay, the King James Bible, right? That's the go-to. That's the leading interpretation that Christians, pay attention to when it comes to this Bible here. Okay, well, King James you're not going to tell me that these folks did not have a motive behind why they selected certain books over others. And that's why I said, how do we know that? Did God say he's the Father, or did man say he's the Father? And honestly, it's semantics, because I don't care. I believe that God is God, the one true and ultimate creator. I know that God exists. I don't care if God is male, female, whatever. I'm not even I could care less about those specifics, right? All I'm saying is, you have to be in relationship with him so that you know him for yourself. You've got to know God for yourself, and you can't just go with what someone has taught you to believe. You gotta have the relationship yourself. So what somebody else believes and what they say, it matters. It doesn't mean I can't learn from someone else, because I certainly can, because God knows I don't know it all. Okay, I don't know the heck. I know very little. Okay, and I know very little. But what I do know is that what someone tells me and what they tell me alone cannot be the end all be all for me and my relationship with God. You got to know it for yourself. You got to experience it for yourself. And it's your relationship with God is what matters. You know what I'm saying? So, anywho, hey, Dimples Wimples. Ooh, child. So yeah, so I'm going to end it right there, you guys. I hope that that people are gonna find something, get something out of this. It's not to say that you're gonna leave listening to this book and you're gonna be like, yeah, this is the best thing I've ever heard, or yep, I agree with him 100%, because look, it's not even about that. I hope you get something out of it. And if you don't, I can respect that too, because I want us to be able to talk about it. And we can all learn from one another. That's all I'm saying. Yes. So, okay, guys, so I'm going to leave it there. Again, so we have read chapters 1 and 2. We'll start on chapter 3 next Sunday because I'm going to make this a weekly thing until we get through it. So if you want to purchase the book, you can feel free to do so. Again, you can go out to Amazon, and the author's name is Donald Miller. It's called Blue Like Jazz, and it's $10.99 at Amazon. But again, if you do not want to purchase the book, you do not have to purchase the book, because I'm going to read that bad boy right here. Okay. I'm going to do it. No, don't be sorry, Dimples Wimples. Girl, listen to this at your own pace, baby. Jan, what you say? Thank you. Enjoying the conversation. Yay, good. I'm telling you, I feel like I scared some people off, because when I said I feel like some of these stories in the Bible are parables in the Old Testament, I know that messed up people. Look, there's things I'm saying to y'all that, I ain't said to my own church family, because I know how. Look, let me tell y'all this real quick. I remember mentioning, this is back in the early 2000s, I was in Bible study, and I mentioned to the Bible study group that I didn't believe in the Trinity. And boy, oh boy, I think they wanted to kick me out the whole church, child. I think they wanted to, because that was just something you ain't supposed to say as a Christian. Now, I'm not saying I don't believe, and let me say, for those that may be just tuning in, I am not suggesting that I don't believe in God. I'm not saying I don't believe in Jesus, and I'm not saying that I don't believe in the Holy Ghost, because I believe in all three of them things. But I believe God is God. I do not believe that Jesus is God. I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Now that's what I believe. Just like I got a child, right? And my child is of me, but he is not me. You feel me? My child is of my loins. He is of my, he is of my blood, my flesh. He is of me, but he ain't me. Okay? So I cannot say that Jesus is God. And I just feel like, what sense does it make that he is God? I believe that he is of God, therefore he has a lot of power, and he's perfect. All of those things are true. I believe all those things to be true. But if Jesus was God, why did he say, why hast thou forsaken me? Why, when he was on that cross, did he say to God, his Father, why hast thou forsaken me? So you mean to tell me Jesus is talking to himself and saying that himself had forsaken him? That makes no sense. Makes no sense. So when I said this about the Trinity, and I said, I just don't believe in the Trinity. I believe that these three parts exist, but they are not one and the same. And show me in the Bible where it says that there's a Trinity. It doesn't say it. It does not say it. You can't find it in the Bible because it's not in there. And so again, we buy into what we've been told to believe and not what we've studied to show thyself approved. So look, I'm just saying, child. Boy, when I said that, these people lost their whole minds. They act like I was the devil. Okay, that's what they, baby. Anywho, so it is what it is. I'm glad I'm not going crazy. No, you ain't going crazy. Wait a minute. Fedora said, girl, I got kicked out of Bible study of women when I had questions. I left full of knowledge about them. Ain't that the truth? Mm-hmm. Southside Chi-Town said, the Trinity is a complicated concept. It's a concept that somebody made up. That's my point. My point is, it's not in the Bible. It's not even in the Bible. So the fact that everybody is standing on this, 10 toes down on it, when it's not in the Bible, that's when we have to ask ourselves a question. why do you believe what you believe? And I'm gonna tell you, I'd always questioned Christianity a little bit, but when the pandemic happened, and I was just looking at all the racism around the country, it for me. Now, I'm not saying I can't even make sense of it to everybody in a way where you're gonna be like, no, now, why did you draw these lines? Why did you come to these conclusions based upon what I was just seeing on TV? I can't make it make sense for anybody else. What I'm saying for myself is that as I sat during the pandemic and saw George Floyd and saw all the stuff just in my face, all the racism and people feeling emboldened to be so racist and just everything that was going on, it made me wonder again in that moment, why are we so look, I feel that I'm a Christian, but not in the sense that other people believe in Christianity. I believe that a Christian should just for me, it is looking to Jesus as the example by which we should live. Period. End of discussion. That to me is a Christian, not these other rules and these thoughts about how we should function. No, again, it goes back to relationship for me. Rules don't matter when you're in relationship. If I'm in love with you, I'm not going to do certain things because I'm in love with you. You shouldn't even have to tell me how to act. I'm going to act like somebody who is in love with you. If I'm in love with Christ, if I'm in love with God, then that should show up in the way in which I live. That doesn't mean I'm going to be perfect. It just means that I will strive for perfection. I'm going to strive towards it. I'm going to strive to please God and to be good to others and not to harm others. I mean, that's what Christianity should be about. Because let's be clear, if we were all clear and in agreement as to what Christianity looked like and what it's supposed to be like, there wouldn't be so many doggone denominations of Christianity. It just wouldn't be. I don't know why we got all these different churches, why we got all these different types of Christians out here. At the end of the day, it should be about your relationship with God and the example by which Jesus laid out for us to follow. And let's be very clear about this. Jesus wasn't as judgmental as some of you niggas are. Let's be very clear about that. Jesus wasn't judgmental. Jesus was hanging with all kinds of people that was in and out of jails and prisons, murderers, child. So that's why Christians get on my damn nerves while you bullshitting. Okay. It don't make no sense, sassy experience. All these different people. Now we all Christians, but we got all these denominations. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. Just like there's a whole bunch of different denominations. I don't know if that's what they refer to it as, but even within the Muslim religion, there's so many different types of Muslims. You know what I'm saying? My thought is this: if at the end of the day, if it was the end all be all, Christianity was the end all be all, we'd all be on the same page as to how that would look. And we're not. And I think, that's fine too. I mean, hey, that's fine too, I guess, because, the way I worship and that I'm comfortable worshiping is not necessarily how the next Christian's comfortable worshiping. I think we can all learn something from one another. I'm also the Christian that says, hey, I believe in God and I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And I believe that Jesus is the example by which, we should look to live our life. I also believe that Jesus is not the only example. Ooh-wee. Christians don't like to hear that either. Okay. They don't like that. I hear people, when I hear people saying that that the only way to get to heaven is through Jesus. Okay. I'm really messed y'all up on this one. But see, this is just how my brain works, okay? I don't know that I believe that either, because that would suggest that ain't nobody made it to heaven until Jesus was born. And if that's the case, you mean to tell me that all these people that God used in the Old Testament, all of these people, David in particular, let me just use one person in as an example. David, a man after who? God's own heart. My God, today. David, the whole adulterer. David, the whole murderer. Him, that one. Yeah, him. You mean to tell me he didn't make it to heaven? Moses didn't make it to heaven? Noah didn't make it to heaven. Cause Noah was a drunk. And while you fooling, y'all better go back and read your word, because Noah, while he was a drunk, he also was looking at his son in a very questionable way. That's in the word. But we skip right over that. And when I say looked at his son in a questionable way, look, y'all go read for yourself. Now, I'm not judging Noah. I'm saying he wasn't perfect. And I'm saying he had a flaw. And one thing that the word suggests is that he wasn't right. And he looked at his son when he was drunk in a way you shouldn't look at another man or a son. Now that's in the word. But we skip right over that. My question is this: God used Noah, right? I got a whole question. I that whole Noah thing and having to get all the animals and gather them up. I don't know. I don't know why God needed Noah to gather all the animals. He didn't need prototypes when he created them in the first place. I don't know that our body he needed these animals. I don't know. I don't know. Y'all don't judge me. I'm just saying what I'm saying. I'm just saying y'all gotta ask yourself these questions, okay? All I know, that's right. The woman he chose. The conversation has a lot of layers. It does. Yes, it has a lot of layers. Just like I said at the beginning of this, heck, in Genesis says Adam and Eve, they're the first two humans, right? That's the first two people that God created. But where did other people come from? Because Adam and Eve didn't populate the whole earth. And we know this because even in the same book of Genesis, towards the end, that's right. That's right, Shell. But at the end of Genesis, they talk about these other people in the land. Where they come from? How did child, y'all ain't going, don't, see, if y'all, see, this is why I get put out. This is what I get put out. I didn't get put out the Bible study group, but I'm just saying what I'm saying. So Noah was a drunk, incestuous contract. I'm telling you that he looked at his son in a way, yes. Now that's in the word, okay? But people don't always be reading the word and listening and paying attention to what they read, and child, okay? Yeah, he was an animal whisperer. He was that, okay? I guess he was. But I'm just saying, why did God need him to gather up all them animals? And how big was this ark is what I want to know. Because a whole bunch of animals out here in these streets. Okay. So anyway, y'all, let me get off my soapbox. Cause see, child, I don't want to mess up nobody's relationship with the Lord. I'm just saying, I got questions, and I think it's okay to have them. And yeah, that's all. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, you guys, thank you so much for joining me on today. I will see y'all back next Sunday at 4 p.m. We will resume at chapter 3 of Blue Like Jazz by Donald Miller. And I look forward to seeing you guys then. What'd you say? No camera back then, allegedly. Allegedly in Harmon. You said what no camera back then. You're right. I wish they had a camera. I wish there was a video camera, audio camera. I mean audio camera, audio tape, something. I needs to understand better. I don't want to keep going by the word of people who wrote this down and then interpreted their way, and then somebody else came behind them and interpreted another way. That's what I'm saying. We believe all these different interpretations, but then be mad when somebody got a question about it, and then recognize that the way I hear something may not be the way y'all hear it, right? And the way, look, y'all ever played the telephone game? The telephone game, you can be 10 of us right here in this one room, and I can whisper in one person's ear, and by the time you get to the 11th person on the other side, that story can change all kinds of which ways. And so my thought is, how come y'all don't think that way when it comes to this Bible? That's what I don't understand. And then I've heard people say, well, the word of God, is perfect. And look, God's word is perfect, but people ain't. And people hear things the way they want to hear them. And sometimes without even, without any bad intentions, we can hear things the way we hear them. But I know that the way you hear something and the way I hear it may not be the same. And it might definitely, one thing about God's word is that you can hear the same, you could read the same word. And today I hear this and it stands out. Next week I can read it and something else might stand out. And both things can be true, right? But I also think that there's a part of me that's human and flawed. And sometimes I'm going to gravitate to the thing that I want to hear. Now, that's just because I'm just not perfect, because I wasn't Jesus. But as much as I want to be like Jesus, I'm not him and I'm not perfect. And so in the way that I know I'm not perfect, I know humans aren't perfect. And sometimes we get it wrong. Yes. Yes, Southside Chi-Town. Sometimes we get it wrong. Now, I think that here's the thing. I also think that there are books right now that have been written that are God's word too, because I feel that God didn't stop inspiring word millions of years ago. I think he's still inspiring people today. Who's to say he ain't inspiring what I got to say right now, child? Woo, Jesus. Anyway, let me get the heck out of here. All right? Before I get in trouble. Okay. Hey, my Tai. V, it's nice to know I'm not the only one thinking this way. Girl, that's how I felt about this book right here. When I read the book, I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus. I am not the only one who got some questions and some thoughts and that sort of thing. So, anywho. Hey, little lady Di. All right, y'all, we're going to get out of here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, or joining me and sharing in this. And we're going to talk more. Okay, we're going to talk more about this. Oh, yes, we are. We got to. All right. I love you all to pieces. And ain't nothing, not a doggone thing you can do about it. Smooches.